You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos.
All right, everybody, Here for the Truth, episode 67. And we have an incredible guest for you as always. We have Peter Pham. Peter Pham is the principal of Maat's Method, a human rights law firm and spiritual coaching platform operating out of Darug, west of Sydney. Maat is the Egyptian goddess of truth, justice, and balance, the divine order which underpins our existence in this world. Peter is proud to stand in the light and tradition of his ancestors to fulfill what he believes is his mission, to remind people of who and what they really are. I absolutely love that man. And in reading that, I know our missions certainly are aligned. Peter is someone that I've been connected with for the past year and a half, someone who I've been communicating with regarding various mandates and etc. that's been going on and things that I've had to deal with in my own life as well. And he's offered some sage advice at timely times for sure. Peter, brother, thank you so much for being here for the truth.
It's a real pleasure to be here. I came across Joel first on Instagram. I think it was early 2020, early 2020. And it was very refreshing, as I've said this to Joel before, it was very refreshing to see someone speaking so honestly about what was happening in the world and just shining their light for others. So I knew I was going to connect with Joel somehow. And it's good to be on this platform because these spaces are getting smaller. So it's good that you guys are doing this. Thanks for what you do.
No, man, we wouldn't be doing anything else. And you know as well as I do, man, in speaking our truth, we find our tribe, we find our people. You know what I mean? This is why it's so important to speak out and let it be known.
Yes.
And this is just the proof that's in the pudding. Bro, let's dive deep. Can you give me the breakdown of your hero's journey, your origin story, major rites of passage? How did you grow and evolve into who you are today?
Wow, what a question. That's the question, isn't it? Really.
Mm-hmm.
I went through what a lot of people, I guess, call a dark night of the soul when I encountered the Sydney CBD, I guess, was a trigger. I never felt, growing up, I didn't feel like the society I lived in was very aligned with who I was as a person. I always felt like if I showed parts of who I am, I was shamed for it or it just didn't quite fit in. And there was a discomfort that I didn't understand until pretty recent, well, a few years ago. To the extent that I understand it, I'm still learning about myself. But everything came to a bubbling over point when I was in corporate law. It was the most far removed from who I am as a person I could possibly be, which I knew going into it, that was what was going to happen. But I also knew I sort of wanted to experience it to really see what that was like. And indeed, it was what I feared it would be, which was a very detached place from who I am and who I believe we are as well. So my life has kind of been a series of choices that are thrown at me where I can choose to be myself or choose to compromise. And when I was in corporate law, that was kind of the point where I said, okay, no more compromises. I'm going to start choosing to just be who I am. And from there, I dropped a lot of the baggage that I was holding and a lot of what I was trying to present to the world in a way of, I guess, trying to prove that that I was okay for that world. I realized that world actually wasn't something that I wanted to be okay for, and it wasn't who I am anyway, and have decided to instead just be myself. So I guess there was a trigger, which was a period of real difficulty. I was pretty depressed when I was in the corporate law world. I found it very difficult. Although on the outside I was doing well and I was performing well in that world, I was in deep spiritual pain. And that really it was like a course correction. And since then, I've been listening more to how I feel and what I think the universe is telling me.
Awesome, man. It's
that was an awkward answer to your question, but
no,
it's
not
the best I could do.
I'm just curious from a timeline standpoint.
all, bro.
Like when was this period where you were having like kind of the deep dark night of the soul and questioning the path as a corporate lawyer and wanting to step more into your truth?
It was about it's about four or so years ago where I was actually in corporate law, and sort of had my own journey going on at the same time. But I was it was about 4 years ago that I was in corporate law, and then since then, I mean, it seems like a lot has happened since then, but a lot has happened since then. Things have changed a lot, in my life. Yeah,
for sure, bro. What is your spiritual foundation, so to speak?
I think that's really important for me. I draw a lot of strength from my lineage and my ancestors. I'm what people call today's Coptic, although I'm not particularly. If you sort of Googled what a Coptic is, there's a religious element to it so I'm Egyptian. The Copts, we trace our lineage back beyond the current colonial powers in Egypt. So Egypt is currently predominantly an Islamic republic. Before that, Egypt's been colonized by everybody. So before that, it was colonized by the Romans, the Greeks, Persians. Before all that, we believe we were there. So we're indigenous to that part of Northern Africa. I have always loved the myths. So something I say is a myth is something that is not true, but has always been true of ancient Egypt. And the Kemetic spirituality is something that I get a lot of my foundation from. It's my framework for viewing the world in a lot of ways. But I really just like all kinds of ancient spiritualities and frameworks. I have a Hindu friend who has pulled me into Hinduism a bit, and I really like that framework as well. In general, I think that we all sort of have our own way of interpreting what's going on and dealing with it accordingly. But the ancient Egyptian way is mostly what I go to.
Cool, bro. So, like, when you were, I guess, were working in corporate law, I guess there's this essential dissonance that arises when, I guess, the world or the environment you find yourself in is not in complete alignment with who you are. So from there, I don't know, obviously, your whole story, but I understand that you ended up working in what's the
I went to legal aid. Yeah,
legal aid. That's right. And then legal aid had some issues when you started, I guess, speaking some truth in regards to certain things that were happening the past 2 years. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I came into law as an abuse lawyer. I've always been trying to escape law, but I can't escape it. So even out of corporate law, this thing, human rights law, came up at legal aid, which is obvious. A lot of people who are in law aspire to be human rights lawyers. A lot of people go to law school hoping to become human rights lawyers, because a lot of people go into law genuinely want to do the right thing. Now, this human rights law came up at legal aid, which is obviously a government role, and I was quite curious about what a human rights lawyer in a government department would be, because in my experience so far in life and also in law, the breacher of human rights is usually the government. However, I was told upon joining Legal Aid that it was an independent statutory body, and their funding is not dependent on the work that they do, and the claims are still against, for example, the police for heavy-handed policing or illegal policing, or against the government for all kinds of things that we all know the government does. I was at Legal Aid for a couple of years, and people are doing their best, and everybody there was doing some good work. However, it is bound up in the regulations of those kinds of departments, where ultimately you do hit walls when you're trying to do something, what I would say was meaningful or important. I would often hit a wall. An example of that is a lot of the work I did was around the way Indigenous people are treated by the police. And one of the most powerful ways to raise awareness of that would be to go to the media and say, hey, look at this 12-year-old kid just getting absolutely bashed by this cop. But at Legal Aid, you weren't allowed to do that because there were some sensitive relationships between maybe the commissioner of police and the person who's at the top of Legal Aid. Towards the end of my time in Legal Aid, the COVID-19 stuff was all coming to the surface. And I was, in my own life, starting to do that work outside of Legal Aid because I have training as a lawyer, and a lot of what was happening had to do with the law and with the perspective and the perspective I had on what was going on, plus my training as a lawyer. That was quite a powerful thing, because not many lawyers still have the perspective of what's going on at the moment. They're caught up in their identity as lawyers and their own trauma and their own conditioning and programming and all of that. As I started to speak up more and more and more, I started to get in more and more trouble at Legal Aid. In particular, there was this one article that I wrote called the Curious Case of the Unlawful Public Health Orders, which is not a great name, but it ended up going pretty viral. And it was essentially, I was looking at the public health orders and just saying, come on, this is pretty outrageous. And I made an academic case for why they weren't lawful. I don't say it was a perfect case, but it was one person looking at the law and making an academic argument about why legally they may not be sound. Got a lot of traction, and I got in a lot of trouble. And that was a trigger for me where I said, okay, we're going in different directions here. I knew that eventually I wanted to do my own thing, but I would have preferred at that point to have done it further down the road, maybe when I had more perceived knowledge or security or whatever. But nonetheless, I just had to make the choice to be authentic and pivot away, especially given what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah, and so were you forced out of Legal Aid because of that article, or am I wrong in that?
No, I wasn't forced out. I had a contract at Legal Aid that was expiring in early this year. It would have expired, actually. In government roles, as you know, generally most people are on contracts and the contracts renew. I wasn't forced out. I was in a lot of disciplinary meetings and things like that.
Yep.
And I also knew that they were going to bring in the vaccine mandate soon as well. And my manager knew that I was not vaccinated, not planning to be vaccinated, and I was transparent about that. And I kind of had a choice to make, whether to jump off the cliff now and immediately go all out, all of my time trying to work directly on what's going on in the world, because I was doing it on the side already.
Yeah.
Or kind of spend a lot of what I thought would just be wasted energy fighting against Legal Aid and saying, oh, there shouldn't be a vaccine mandate and so on. I kind of just wanted to dodge all of that and put all of my energy into helping people. So I left before I was pushed, if that makes sense, but it was getting pushy. Yeah.
Nah, got you, man. It's so funny, bro. That article was sent to me by 7 or 8 different people before I even knew who you were or we even met or any of that. So it certainly did go viral. Then I remember we were on the same men's call once upon a time, and the
Yes.
conversation came up, and you were telling me you're a human rights lawyer and whatnot, and that you wrote that article, and all the synchronicities came in. So as a human rights lawyer, can you clear out for the audience what of the past 2 years actually has been not within it or has been in breach of that?
uh, yes, yes and no. The legal system is a system which society still sort of ascribes to and gives meaning to and gives power to. Um, within the boundaries of the legal system, I do believe that a lot of what's happened in the past 2 years is not lawful. Um, However, the problem is that the overall legal system itself is, let's say, infected with the same poison or corruption as the rest of society.
Yep.
So, um, because of that, to assess the legality of what's happening using the legal system is a difficult thing to do because the legal system is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
However, yes, there are laws that have not been used in the way they were supposed to be used. A good example of that is the Public Health Act. Each state and territory has a Public Health Act, which is an act that is supposed to, in times of pandemic or emergency, give the minister extraordinary powers to use, rather than go through the checks and balances of those acts and do what the acts are designed for, which is to provide a measured response to an emergency.
Yep.
The ministers have all just kind of taken shortcuts and misinterpreted, in my opinion, one section of each act in order to make these public health directions or public health orders and make these sweeping orders that have obviously restricted and affected everybody's lives, like the restrictions on movement and the vaccination orders and so on. So the public health orders are unlawful uses of broader legislative schemes, the Public Health Acts. However, they're only unlawful if a court says that it's unlawful. And myself and probably less than 10 other lawyers are currently doing our best within that system to get a court to admit or to say that it's unlawful. But it's difficult in that context to get that kind of result. And ultimately, I think, and I'm probably going beyond the scope of the question a bit, but ultimately, I think that the legal system is in its current form is not going to be the solution to what's happening right now. It needs to be something that is broader than that and that comes from within each person.
Yeah. So, strictly from a human rights perspective, for example, and obviously, in my opinion, we obviously have inalienable rights which exist beyond the system. But
Yes.
within the framework of the legal human rights system, what general human rights are actually given to an individual according to the system? For example, like the rights of protest, right? You'd think that there would be a given human rights that is protected by one of these conventions or whatnot. But we saw, for example, that that's not exactly the case, perhaps. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. Sure. Australia's human rights framework is very poor. There are international covenants and agreements that Australia are signatory to, like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. But although Australia has signed these agreements, they're not enshrined in domestic law. So Australia doesn't have a Bill of Rights. The Constitution maybe enshrines people's right to political communication, but it's pretty poor, and the High Court hasn't really enforced it anyway. So basically, Australian law is very bad at enshrining human rights. The US is much better than Australia is, and lots of other countries are actually. But yeah, in terms of what human rights do you have within the system,
Yeah.
not that many. Therefore, that's why I tend to go outside of the system, and try to direct people there as well. But the system is not very good at protecting or enforcing human rights in Australia.
Is there a reason why you think that Australia is so lackluster in that area compared to other countries?
Yeah, I think it has to do with Australia's lack of solid foundation as a country. Australia is a 300-year-old penal colony built on the land of an 100,000-year-old society that they came in and killed and genocided. I think that a poisonous tree bears poisonous fruit, and the society that we find ourselves in Australia is only as good as the foundation that it's built on, and the foundation is not solid at all. It's as you know, it's well, yeah. I think that's all I could say.
Nah, fair enough, man. So like from your perspective, what are actual reasonable, tangible steps or processes that can be taken to begin to correct some of these systems? You know,
Everybody,
or is it a matter of, you mean, just obviously where the standpoint that I've come from for a lot of this is fuck the system.
It is. I don't know about how far I would go with. I do agree mostly with fuck the system. However, we do also still live in this system to some extent.
Mhm.
I think ultimately the answer is that everybody needs to go inside themselves. Everything is about us as individual human beings. If we feel like we need the system in some way, that's usually a trick. This is a time when we're being forced inside and forced to be self-sufficient and be autonomous and be sovereign, right? The legal system, for all of its pomp and grandeur, it does not make us who we are.
Yep.
Who we are is who we are, and we need, as a collective and as individuals, to return to self and return to a knowledge and understanding and foundation which is solid, which is the foundation that we all have within ourselves. And I know it's a bit, it's not very tangible to a lot of people, but ultimately what's happening right now is a collective return to self. And that we're seeing that these systems that are outside of us aren't very productive or useful or positive. And any little steps we can take to be self-sufficient would be a positive thing to do, in my opinion, at the moment.
Yeah, man, I obviously agree, and you know, this is to the extent where I say, you know, because ultimately these systems are designed essentially to serve us. One would think that the purpose of such systems would be to protect individual rights and to protect human rights, and that
Yes.
the I guess the sway of power is currently reversed on some level. So I think you're right. In order to get back there, I think we do need to embody a little bit of the fuck the system, until the system is willing to do what it was, I guess, designed to do in the first place. Now, in saying that, it wasn't really designed to do that in Australia. I mean, if you look at the founding of America, I think it's a different story when we talk about individual rights and that the purpose of government, ultimate purpose of government, the ultimate purpose of the law is simply to protect those rights at the end of the
Yes.
day. So, yeah, I mean, the way I see it all, man, is a lot of the flaws and a lot of the holes within these systems are being exposed and have come to the surface for
Yes.
for the maliciousness that they are and they do pose. And I believe that through this process, more and more people are waking up to those gaping holes and those gaping flaws and the areas
Yes.
where the system is on some level not designed to serve them and more so inclined to enslave them. And I think to the degree that people wake up to that, people that are making a return towards self are going to be naturally inclined to reject those aspects of the system. And so it's my hope that a natural self correction will occur through that process.
Beautiful idea. And I believe that's occurring too. I think that, as you said very beautifully just now, society is um, in a process which is correcting itself, and as it corrects itself, and as um, the, it's like one analogy that I think of is it's like kind of getting out of bed in the morning. Sometimes I say this because this is like the first cold day of the year we've had. So I was thinking about the cold and what it does. You're in bed and it's comfortable and you don't want to get out of bed, right? You prefer to stay in there. It feels nice. But when you know, if you do get out of bed, and once you do get out of bed, it's a positive thing. If you stay in bed all week, you'll probably waste away. What's happening right now is like a collective getting out of bed. It's uncomfortable, but once we all get through the discomfort, it's going to be a much brighter, more human experience that we're living through. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I think it's also what's taken place has almost given people permission to reclaim more of their individual power and their personal power, because it's so blatant that they draw lines with the system, that they disagree with the system. For example, I'm
Yes.
just simply not going to be coerced or forced to get the vaccine. And if that's the line that
Yes.
you want to take, then you're going to
Yes.
force me to find other avenues to invest
Yes.
my energy and to grow my power and to become more self-reliant as well. Um,
And that's what's happened with me. I
Yep.
was essentially forced to jump off a cliff before I otherwise would have, but because of what's happening. And there's a quote by Ram Dass. He says that life is the curriculum of the soul. Um, I was forced to
Hmm.
deal with a lot of things internally that I wouldn't have to have had to deal with, and to start my own business and everything that comes with that, and deal with the uncertainty of that, and to but these are all opportunities, because now I'm living much more authentically. I'm able to be myself. I'm not in corporate law anymore. I didn't have this hair when I was in corporate law, but I actually did at one point when I was a corporate lawyer. This was a funny story that's kind of a moment of what that diversion back to myself was. I did get dreadlocks when I was in corporate law. I knew I wanted to have them for a long time, and I got them when I was in corporate law, and then I cut them off the same weekend because I knew that it was going to be too much of a disruption in that world. And so I was, okay, that's it. After that, I'm never doing that again. I'm just going to be myself. And that's the opportunity that this huge, tension filled external environment gives us. And it's kind of like the gun to the head, for a lot of people. Unfortunately, it seems like we need a pretty big shake to get back on track. But yes, more and more people every day are reaching out to me and telling me that this has been a very positive process for them, which is
Life is
good.
life is so much better when you can just be yourself, when you don't have to walk in
Oh,
eggshells.
yes.
I think back to like years ago working in a small element of the corporate world, and wearing a suit and tie every day. And not to say I don't like wearing a suit and tie, but it just the formal element of it, the like, I need to show up in a certain way and I need to speak in a certain way. And if I
It's quite
use it
ridiculous.
if I
Yeah.
use a different tone, or if I speak about something outside of, the confines of what we're talking about when it comes to law or whatever the case may be, it's just like
Yes.
there's like a stiffness, there's a tightness, like there's not a
Yes.
fluidity where you can just feel like you accept yourself fully, and then another person's accepting you fully, and you can just dance and you can have dialogue and it's all good. It's just
Yes.
when you're
Yeah,
in
but
the
that's not
system, like
very
that's different.
productive. That
No,
doesn't produce a lot of results and resources. And
I
yeah,
agree. I agree. I couldn't have any of that.
It's kind of, but what takes place on the external is kind of symbolic of what's going on the inside. You know what I mean? You begin to compromise yourself to fit into a certain world. So you change the way you look, you change the way you dress, etc., etc., etc. And then
Yes,
eventually play that charade long enough, and the external inauthenticity is going to generate internal inauthenticity as well. Because the external compromises that you make to fit into that world, eventually it's going to filter in and infest the compromises that you make internally to fit in with
indeed.
that within that paradigm as well.
Indeed, and if you look at the society that we live in, it's clearly a society filled with individuals who have made a lot of compromises because if they hadn't, we wouldn't be where we are. Um, I wonder whether, using this analogy of individuals and society, as an individual, the spiritual pain, I think, well, for me, it became too much to bear, and I had to go the other way.
Yep.
And one of the things I think about is, where is that point for the collective consciousness? I do think that it is going the other way, but there's still a lot of pain and torment that is going on in the world at the moment. So it's something I think about. I mean, I think that the next 5 or 10 years are going to remain very uncomfortable externally for anybody who um, draws their reliance from the external world. And we're all going to be forced to be much more self-reliant in that time than whatever level we are now. We're all going to have to level up.
Yeah, I think people that are making those moves and transitions now simply have a head start. I mean, it would seem that, you mean, the pain, so to speak, has subsided for the meantime. That doesn't mean that it's not going to
Yeah,
come again. I think that people will be making a huge mistake in getting comfortable and in thinking that, you know what I mean, I'm not going to be coerced or forced in another way by new means ever again. And like, we speak of the collective consciousness, but ultimately, to me, that collective is only made up of individuals. There's only individual minds and only individual consciousness, which essentially makes up that collective. And what I
yes,
see is that people are waking up in waves, which are relative to this shadow that's being forced up by this pain that's being perpetuated by these systems. You know, and I think each the level or the degree of pain that each individual is willing to bear before they're like, okay, that's enough. I'm gonna fucking do what it takes to move through this is obviously different. So you know what I
yes,
mean? I think, for example, what we saw the last 2 years was there was a bunch of individuals who weren't willing to bear that level of pain. You know,
yes,
we all did have the proverbial gun to our heads, and people made different choices accordingly. And I think the
yes,
next time when that gun becomes pointed again, there's obviously going to be another quote unquote collective awakening, which is simply relative to a bunch of individuals who are going to say that's enough, and then they'll have to start
yes,
that process as well. But it's always
yes,
painful reclaiming that power for yourself, because it means
yes,
you have to become acutely aware of all the inauthenticity, all the compromise
yes,
that you've accrued.
yes, yes, indeed. It's people call it shadow work, and
Yep.
they use the word work for a reason. It's extremely courageous and um, um, powerful, but courageous is probably the key, um, to make that choice and then to act on it, to choose to engage with what's in the shadows. And it's, I always admire and respect people who are doing that, because I know what that means. It's a choice that is an individual choice, but it's also a collective choice. And it's ultimately, I think, the greatest act of love that one can have for the collective, which is to do that deep self shadow work, to look at your own demons, stare at the wall and don't look away. It's tempting to look away, but just keep staring at the shadows. And also being kind to yourself as what comes up might come up, and working through that. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. And like, the thing is, the shadow doesn't only contain your demons and your devils and all the bullcrap. It also contains all your potential. It also contains all your
Yes,
possibility for success, all that ambition.
indeed.
There's so much vital psychic energy that is tangled up trying to keep these demons at bay. that when you actually let that go, when you move through and work through and untangle that, there's so much more accessible to us to actually use towards productive effort
Indeed.
at the same time.
And the reason why in our society today, just to play off that,
Yeah.
a lot of people are struggling with what's happening and feel like they don't have a choice, is because that potential that you talk about that's trapped in those shadows, trapped in that trauma,
Yep.
just hasn't been given the space to play. And often um, it's the courage to just take a look inside, that gives those people the potential to then deal with and engage with the external reality. I think something that I have to remind myself, and that I acknowledge, is that we're not living in a normal time. It's I guess in my day-to-day work, I'm always encountering people who are really going through it, like people who are dealing with serious they've lost their job because of a vaccine mandate, and it's a single mom with like 4 kids, and she's homeless, and we're living in a time that is everything is really turned up to 11 or 12, and it's a beautiful process, but one that, to use that example again, one where that mother, when I speak to her, says to me, um, it's really difficult, but I can see what's happening here. I can feel what's happening, which is a sort of encapsulation of what's happening, I think.
Yeah, dude. It's even with within my world, I find that it's quite sobering because it's a little bit easier for me than you, I guess, to forget the actual pain and the damage that has been caused because of everything that's taken place. You know, particularly people who built lives dependent on the system, then all of a sudden have that swept from under the rug, and I'm sure you're encountering that every single day. Um, so, like, in your process now and in your efforts, is there is there help available to them? Is there any kind of remorse? Is there any kind of support that's now being offered, or is it still they're holding the same line of either you compromise yourself or that's it?
Um, Help that's being offered.
Is the
Uh,
government changing their tune at all around around these issues? Are you sensing that on any level?
as you said, things have receded. The tide has receded,
Mm.
so some of the mandates are dropping, and there is a lower intensification right now. But the reason I use the analogy of the tide receding is because that happens. It goes in and it comes out, and it goes in and it comes out.
Yeah.
To answer your question more directly, I would say no. I don't think the government has changed their tune. Um, Inevitably, the government is going to have a choice over time, um, whether to the government. When I say the government, I'm referring to the actual politicians who are
Yep.
sort of in power. They're going to be able to choose to acknowledge, to use the example of vaccines, to acknowledge that, okay, maybe we shouldn't have forced this on everyone. There's a lot of adverse events. There's a lot of death reports. A lot of people, this is affecting their health. Our bad. Or they can really dig in and just kind of go down faster. Um, but at the moment, the governments are just like little kids. They're desperate not to admit that they've done anything wrong. They're holding on to this. No, 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 it's quite childlike, what they're doing, and people can't really get much assistance from them at present. If on a more direct level, one of the main things people are still going through is
Mhm.
dismissal from work. Um, you can go to the Fair Work Commission or the Industrial Relations Commission, and you might be able to, if you've been unfairly dismissed, which means you've made a decision, let's say, um, to remain unvaccinated in this example, despite your company or industry mandating that you have to be in order to work there. Um, I mean, my opinion of that is that um, it's not lawful within the rules of the law, within employment law, within the system, for any employer to mandate a medical intervention for their staff. It's a clear abrogation of the laws. If you look at the common law around employers intervening in employees' lives, there's always been a reluctance to do that. The closest example to vaccination is medical examinations, which is very far away from vaccination, but it's the closest one you have. And in the common law, in the cases, the precedent, the courts are very, very reluctant to say that employers should be able to force employees to undergo medical examinations. So for all of these companies to now think that it's okay to force a medical procedure on their staff, especially in circumstances where the staff, the company has no knowledge of the thing that they're implementing at all, no expertise. So they could not ever deem it to be, say, a reasonably practicable measure to mitigate a risk in the first place. And where the staff member maybe works from home, maybe, it doesn't matter on their circumstance, they're just mandating it as a whole. Is pretty outrageous. It's a clear breach of the law itself. However, until a court actually says that, for the individual, there's not that much that it doesn't really help them. So instead, I come back to the more individual level solutions, the detachment from that system and self-reliance, the community, and so on.
Yeah. Because like I've had friends that work for certain big banks, for example, who obviously have been forced to work from home during this period, but they're still being mandated, even for the fact that they now work from home,
Yeah.
And the like banks and obviously schools is a massive one as well. I mean, all teachers that refuse to get the GB jab were forced to leave. Were forced to leave their jobs at the end of the day. So do you think that that's going to change regarding schools in Australia?
Yes, it has to change over time. What when you say that has to change, the mandating of the vaccine specifically?
Do you think that unvaccinated teachers will be allowed to return to school eventually in Australia?
Yeah, the schools are going to have a choice over time, because the truth always comes out over time.
Yeah.
And it's already happening, right? The amount of people who got the vaccines and they didn't want to get them and had a health problem is huge. There's hundreds of thousands of people who felt off when they got the vaccine. Because I talk to them all the time. They're like, yeah, I got it and I didn't want to get it, but I got it.
Yeah.
And I felt that. That was something. I felt that. Or their uncle died, or their friend got myocarditis or whatever. Truth always comes out. So the schools over time are not going to be able to maintain this ridiculous, you have to get this vaccine in order to work for us, because the vaccine is self-evidently not what it is supposed to be. So yeah, how long will that take? I'm not sure. I think that the broader question is, should workplaces be telling people what to do with their health and their bodies, right? I think companies fell into a trap here. The carrot was dangled in front of them by government by saying, the government really pressured companies into mandating vaccination, but the companies didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
And those that did have kind of dug this hole for themselves that they're still currently, for the most part, trying to justify. The smarter companies are saying, okay, we probably shouldn't have done that, and stepping away from it. But a lot of them are unfortunately trying to justify decisions rather than just admit that, okay, maybe we shouldn't have jumped to that, and what can we learn from this for the future about the relationship between a person and their own health, and an employee and an employer. So I do think it'll change. How long it will take is difficult to say. On a more direct level, there are cases that myself and some of the lawyers who I work with have. So one example is that people may know Serene Tefahar. She's had her practicing certificate removed because of the work, this kind of work, which is one reason why there's not many more lawyers doing it. Anyway, she and I and some of the other lawyers that we work together in tandem with have had cases in court about the illegality of vaccine mandates for more than a year. And inexplicably, those cases are yet to go before a judge. Whereas other cases with arguments that maybe aren't as solid or that are easier to pick holes in have gone before a judge and have been heard and set negative precedents that are then more challenging to get around. So I have to be a little careful about what I say because my practicing certificate is currently still valuable, seems to be valuable. Although that's an example of something that the system has on me that, if I have to release, it's okay. But it is, it's strange that some of the decisions that have been heard so far seem to be decisions that are more subjective in nature. Cases that are built on subjective arguments like bodily integrity and things that are subjective. And if there's something that's subjective, the court will obviously find in accordance with its sensibilities. Whereas if there's a more objective argument based on, say, statutory construction, what does the law say? 1 + 1 = 2. There's no room for subjectivity. And one of those examples, and the reason I'm going on this tangent, is because in employment law, there's a very solid argument to say that employers cannot lawfully mandate vaccines for their staff. It's not within the authority, it's not within the power of the work health and safety legislative scheme for employers to do that. But for some reason, the federal court has not yet allowed that case to be heard, despite it being filed more than a year ago.
Hey guys, hope you've been enjoying the first half of this amazing episode with Peter Pham. Just wanted to interrupt quickly to let our amazing listeners know that applications for our private 8-week group training program, Rise Above the Herd, are open again now. And this is strictly for you if you're listening to this. We have not announced this to the public yet. This is only for our listeners. So if you're listening to this, if you've been sitting on the fence about joining the first course and you missed it and you want to get an application in for the second run, this is the ultimate opportunity. So you can now head to riseabovetheherd.com.au. We'll put the link in the show notes as well, and you can learn more about the course and apply. Please enjoy the rest of this episode.
Now, I'm assuming this is happening now, but do you envision more and more people in the future filing lawsuits against companies they've worked for mandating them? And does that hold water, based on, I don't understand the Australian legal system super well, but especially if they've gotten injury because of the mandate. Like, I understand in the US, like, they're pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, aren't held liable, but can a company that's mandating you to get to take part in this, like, this human experiment, and if you get injury, can you then go after the company instead of going after the doctor or the pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah, on an individual level, it will depend on your employment contract and your relationship with the employer. Generally, though, there's a huge risk of liability there for the company mandating the vaccine. Are more and more people coming forward? One of the problems I'm facing, and when I say we, sometimes there's like a collective group of 5 or 6 lawyers who I know who are kind of on the same page. And we're not all part of the same firm, but we all just work together in a way. And one of the problems we're facing is there's a cognitive dissonance still, which is how I know that the collective consciousness still has a way to go. Even with, for example, the mother of a child who is vaccine injured, and whether that mother is willing to accept that the vaccine caused the injury. And there is a lot of the system. So that mother will go to a doctor who is sort of skeptical and will, her child was fine, and then got vaccinated. And let's say the child has myocarditis, which it's almost almost impossible, if not impossible, that the child would all of a sudden get myocarditis, except for the fact that they had a vaccine a few days before. But the mother goes to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, it's unlikely it was the vaccine. You know, these things happen. As the child had COVID, maybe the child had COVID and you didn't know about it and that caused the myocarditis. And then the mother talks to her friends and her friends are saying, oh, no, it's not the vaccine. You're crazy. You're one of those anti-vaxxers. And then by the time she comes around to us, and we're saying, hey, no, we believe you. We think that your child has been harmed by a wrong, that your child has suffered a terrible injury, and there might be something you can do about it. You might be able to be the plaintiff in a legal action. We found it very difficult to actually get people who are willing to go through that process, because it takes an acceptance that people don't seem to be ready for yet, that actually that is what caused the injury. I think for a mother, for example, for a parent, they have to accept that maybe something they did has harmed their child, which is, earth-shattering. Talk about dark night of the soul.
That's a vulnerability that most people don't have the psycho-emotional fortitude to hold space for that. And this is just something we've been dealing with for decades. Anyone who's been involved in the fight for vaccine truth, this has been happening for so long. So I get it. I have compassion, and I can only imagine what that's like. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess the reason I bring that up is because from a legal perspective, one of the strange things is, we have all the data. I just finished dealing with a federal court case against the Department of Health where every piece of data you could possibly have, we went through, and Peter McCullough was helping us, and experts from around the world in putting together essentially a package just to show the danger of these pharmaceutical products. However, although there is a lot of that injury, unfortunately, and harm, the people who go through that experience, unfortunately, ultimately a legal action has to be brought by an injured party and by people who are willing to go through that process. So whatever the collective process is that's going on, it will get to a point where enough people have been harmed and wronged and are also ready to hold that space, as you say, Yerasimos, to be actively pursuing some form of justice. We're not quite there yet, from what I can tell.
I'm super impressed with your pronunciation of Yerasimos, by the way.
I know.
Oh, I guessed.
You did a great job.
Right.
Thank you. Oh, I'm glad. That's important.
And we're definitely getting a strike on YouTube for this episode. Myocarditis, vaccine, 5G, COVID.
Well, we'll just have to,
Donald Trump. unless Elon Musk buys YouTube next.
Yeah, indeed.
Oh, that's crazy. I think that's crazy, man. I don't know what the.
What do you think about Elon Musk?
I don't know.
What do you think about this guy?
Okay.
Yeah.
This is what I think. I might cop some backlash for this, whatever. But I try to look at things as rationally as possible.
Yeah.
Is this a bad thing that he's bought Twitter and turned it into a private company? Twitter was a fucking cesspool anyway. How can this be? What is there to lose in this process?
Yeah. So he's turning it into a private company.
He's turning it into a private company. He's claiming to remove all of the algorithm bullshit, all the censorship, and bring it back to a place of free speech.
Right. Okay. And then we obviously there's this potential cycle that people might be afraid of but now you've got this guy running this thing, and who is this guy and what are his ultimate intentions? I agree, though. I think that from what Twitter currently is, and for what the general tech landscape currently is, it's difficult to go wrong. And we don't, as much as we don't, need those platforms, it would be nice if suddenly Twitter became a place that everybody could say whatever they want to say. That would be cool.
Dude, I'm an absolutist when it comes to free speech.
If the world's biggest social media platform makes a shift towards free speech, that can be a catalyst for everything. If the narrative is going to be equally presented on the biggest social media platform on the planet, what are the consequences of that?
Massive. It could certainly help a lot of people along in just having a fair access to information. which would be great. That would be great.
Yeah, that's the main thing. I mean, if you can't have access to both sides, how do you make a decision?
Yes.
Even when it comes to this issue we're talking about with certain pharmaceutical products, when has there been proper informed consent? It doesn't happen.
No,
Because
it hasn't happened at all.
if it did happen, most parents would be like, "F that,"
Dude, one of the things I've been super disappointed about I say disappointed, I have been, is in doctors and the medical profession. And I say that with the, it's the same with the legal profession, right? So I'm just, the medical profession is supposed to be built on the Hippocratic Oath, the do no harm principle, informed consent. These are pretty good principles that existed long before the Western medical system and have still remained in the Western medical system. As I said that this is a poisonous tree and it bears poisonous fruit, but some of the principles are ancient principles which are very powerful. They've existed for so long for a reason. And for almost the entire medical profession to completely abrogate and forget about the principle of informed consent is a pretty bad sign. And I really just, it's doctors. In fairness to doctors, a lot of doctors have spoken up and they're getting deregistered by APRA, which is the body that regulates the medical profession. So they're being very militant, just like the law. Well, it's the same with the legal system. Almost got in trouble there. But I have been disappointed in the medical profession not more uniformly and collectively taking a more solid stance against this idea that informed consent doesn't matter anymore and that duress is okay.
This is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people who, in general, go along to get along. Now, that's happening on an individual level, within friends, within families. It happens, like you were saying earlier, corporations going along to get along with daddy government. And the medical profession, I mean, this is an area that I'm very passionate about. My work is involved with it. When it comes to an educational standpoint, a lot of the foundations of modern medicine are built on pseudoscience. And so there's indoctrination, there's training, and you have these people who go through education for years and years and years, and they spend all this money, and then they get to wear the big white coat, and they get to stand on the pedestal, and they get to have the control, and their entire identity is built around this. You talk about cognitive dissonance. Imagine coming face to face with the fact that the last 20, 30 years of your knowledge and education and so much that you've been pushing out to the world are based on falsehoods. I mean, how does an individual sit with that? What psychic capacity? Most people don't even have that. And so to think that like doctors are going to stand up in arms and protest and say, government, we stand together. They're drones. They're drones of this greater system and this greater ill that's been pushed on the planet, on society. And again, it comes back down to individualism. It's what doctor is heroic, what doctor is like, what, something's weird, I'm gonna read something, I'm gonna look into something, I'm gonna expand my mind, and then I gotta make a tough decision, because I got bills to pay, I got a kid in college, I got all this stuff, and now wait, I'm supposed to just throw it all away. It's very challenging for some people.
Indeed. Indeed. I think you're right. Right.
And to me, this is very reminiscent, obviously, of Yuri Bezmenov's testimony of socialist subversion. Sure, the medical professional and the oaths and stuff might have been built on some kind of reasonable foundations in the first place, but to me, the finger needs to be pointed at the fucking universities.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what kind of indoctrination and brainwashing has been taken there for generations upon generations to weed out any semblance of individual rights, of someone that's going to stand up and exemplify some form of heroism in the face of tyranny like it is now. These people are, for the most part, not blanketing everyone, but are brainwashed puppets designed, as Yerasimos said, to go along to get along.
Do you guys believe that society as a whole is I guess I'll paint two alternatives, and maybe it's not a true alternative, but do you believe that society is simply out of balance as part of the process of, let's say, consciousness. So that the Hindus have the yugas, right, where they talk about periods of consciousness, and that there is a long epoch where humanity falls out of consciousness and then it falls back into consciousness. And they talk about during this time that they say it's this time that humanity will become more technology dependent and become more machinistic, will become more susceptible to external influence rather than internally focused on our power and our internal resources. So do you think that society is sort of just out of balance on an individual and collective level, and that as the rebalancing occurs, these systems like the medical system will either be replaced by a healthier one, or will itself fix itself? Or do you think that there is a very intentional group or group of people or things that are infecting or poisoning the collective consciousness with an intent to remove people from who we are? That's something I wonder about. I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think my thoughts, I think it's both, I mean,
Yeah.
I have no proof of who's sitting around in a boardroom making all the decisions of what's going on. You know what I mean? But there's definitely an invisible hand that I've noticed over decades of looking into things and observing and paying attention and connecting dots. And at the same time, I believe in ancient cycles. I do believe there's
Yes.
things that impact the consciousness of humanity. I may not be able to explain it rationally, but I do feel that is the case. And so I always think the solution is you got to come back to individual. You got to do your, like we were talking about earlier, you have to do your individual shadow work. You have to
Yes.
heal as an individual and then come together. And I think these systems, they're done. Like they're not
Yeah.
going to heal themselves from the inside out. What's going to change is what I just said: an individual waking up and
Yes.
then voluntarily collectivizing with like-minded people and going, you know what, the education system is fucked. What
Yes.
can we do? Can we create little pods of homeschooling? And then that shifts that. And then from a medical standpoint, like there's alternatives out there. I mean, I believe in the innate power of the body, the intelligence of the body, the innate healing capacities of the body. Like so much that's pushed from the modern medical paradigm is, like I said before, is just like garbage outside of maybe a small percentage of that supports you in emergency care and acute care. I think most of it's useless and irrelevant as you go deeper and as you expose yourself to different ideologies around health and healing. So I don't know how allopathy all of a sudden just like rewinds and goes, we shall fix this and we shall. And then I just think it's like new systems are going to come into place, or more people are going to just make different choices and new systems will come into play as the other ones fall away. Now, I don't know the timeline of that, when that will happen, but we're living in interesting times. That's for sure.
Indeed.
I think I think we're living in the best times, man. I truly do. And it's like I keep taking this broader view of everything, and I look at it, and it's like there's never been more distrust of allopathy. There's never been more distrust of mainstream media. There's never been more distrust of Hollywood, of the censorship that's taken place, of vaccination. Dude,
Yes.
two years ago,
Yeah.
I could not talk to anyone about a vaccine, dude.
No.
You even say, you mean Agent Smith comes out immediately, bro. You couldn't fucking say shit. Now, so many people are able to hold more space for that conversation, and even just question the premise of it. Things are shifting in the right direction rapidly.
Yes.
That may be a controversial statement, and it may seem as though it might not be the case at all, but everything that happened was necessary. It couldn't have taken place any other way. Pressure is necessary to create a diamond. Pressure is necessary for people to wake up, for the CNs to become mobilized, people to be like, hang on, I've been in this extreme days, this extreme coma. And like I just look at it all and I'm like, there's this decentralization taking place. There's individuals who are able to maintain integrity and still be in positions of power and still speak to the truth and still have money. I don't think the entire control system is collectivized as the quote unquote truth community believes. I don't believe everyone's a shill. I don't believe everyone's controlled op. I don't believe the entire timeline of things is already predetermined. It's not the case at all. Because if you look at it, individual rights on the spec of human history is like not even the tip of my fingernail. It's the newest concept imaginable. And us as human beings are only beginning to realize what it means to be self-responsible, what it means to be an individual, of what it means to not need any form of tyranny, no empire, no pharaoh, no nothing, in order to be responsible for myself. And to me, we're shifting towards that. We're shifting, for the most part, out of collectivism and towards individualism, and more so than ever towards voluntarism, where individuals who have woken up and reclaimed their own power are able to look at other individuals who don't expect anything from each other, aren't willing to sacrifice each other's needs, wants, and desires for one another, and be like, hey, we're on the same page. Let's work together. Let's create something awesome. I've got money, you've got knowledge, I've got education, I've got this. Let's do something, you know? So I'm so deeply excited about what's possible because we talk about these ancient esoteric concepts, you know, as above, so below, as within, so without. My audience knows this one extremely well, obviously. But I look at my own journey. I created a career out of COVID. We have this podcast because of what happened the last 2 years. We have a course, right, which we teach and we bring people through to learn about what it means to step more into the individual power because of everything that's taken place, because of all the pressure that took place. None of that would have been possible. This life that I'm living now, you asked me 2.5 years ago if I think that I'd be here talking to you 67 episodes deep in the podcast with a guy I've never met from LA. Come on, man. Dreaming. Absolutely dreaming. This is the golden era.
I think what you're doing, Joel, is you're surfing the wave. There's a huge opportunity right now. You said it might be controversial to say that, you know, this is necessary, or I don't think it's controversial. I think that you're speaking the wisdom of many ancient cultures from around the world who all told us that this was a period of great awakening. They called it different things. The ancient Egyptians said this was a period of the great awakening of the souls. When I say this period, I mean 2021. You know, the great awakening of the souls. The Mayans called it the apocalypse, but apocalypse doesn't mean, you know, the end of the world. It means a transition. We're clearly living in very powerful times. There are huge opportunities. You know, uncertainty is very fertile ground. When things are looser, you can play with them more. And this podcast is an example of people who have seen the uncertainty, seen the wave, and decided to sort of surf it instead of maybe staring at it or think, oh my God, look at that wave. This is overwhelming. This is crazy. How am I going to deal with this? And that's a good example for people to look at. It can be difficult in very highly pressurized external circumstances. And we've all been there, because I know you don't say this from a place where you're disconnected from that, Joel, but we've all been there. We all have our own individual struggles. You know, we've all been, you have to go through it in order to have this perspective.
Yeah.
But ultimately, this is an opportunity, and we're all here for a reason. I believe we chose to come here to this particular time to embody in the individual expressions of the collective consciousness that we're currently embodying. And yes, hugely transformative time for everybody and for the planet. And I'm also very excited about the future.
For sure, man. And what happens is that, you mean, people were given the opportunity to choose integrity over ignorance. And those that chose integrity are being greatly rewarded for choosing integrity. Because now that all the slowpokes are beginning to wake up, you know, they realize that they want to work with people that maintained integrity. They want to invest in businesses and individuals who maintained integrity. Because there was a great unveiling that took place. You mean, we were able to witness who was authentic, who was inauthentic, who was willing to remain like standing on their feet, and who was willing to basically bend down on their knees in order to maintain this illusion. Because those people decided to buy into the fact that the illusion was going to remain the illusion, that the truth would never come out. And as long as the external illusion remained, then their compromise would also remain in the shadows. But that's obviously a very poor decision.
As you say, there's a well, there's an incoming and an outgoing tide. And when the tide comes in and the wave comes in, you have a choice to make. Will I be authentic? Will I maintain integrity, or will I compromise? And with each wave, more people make the choice to be authentic. The people who might, I mean, it's probably not your audience, but there's a lot of people who seem to still be compromising. And I think what could be important is to sort of, for those of us who have been saying things for a while, to say to those guys, hey, it's all right. If you want to question your position, if you want to question the world in a way maybe you haven't considered before, that's okay. And you're welcome to do that with us, because we don't mind that. That's what we're doing. We're questioning this. We're looking at the world we live in, and we're trying to just understand our reality and do our best. And you're welcome to do that too. And you don't have to be too attached to a position or to anything you did or said in the past, because we want to think about the collective. We want to think about moving forward. We want things to be better than they are now for everybody. And that's going to be really important, I think, as more people are violently shaken awake and sort of look over at the other camp and say, oh, shit, those guys were kind of right about that. Will they still let me in? You have to let them in, I think.
But who are we to even give them permission to let them in or not? Why? What do you mean? Like, why do we give each other that right for? To me, this is the whole problem with the collectivist press, with the collectivist premise. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like, it's up to you as an individual. I'm nobody to tell you that you can't wake up on your own terms. I'm not a gatekeeper by any means whatsoever.
No. I guess in the society we live in, we're probably, well, for a time, there's going to be circumstances and situations where there is gatekeeping going on to some extent. And if there is, I think it needs to come from a place of love. But I agree with you on the whole that ultimately there shouldn't be any gatekeeping of that kind going on.
If to me, man, if there's gatekeeping, there's a petty tyrant that's still waiting to be exposed at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The whole process of waking up as an individual is claiming that authority for yourself. Is you meeting the responsibility required to be the highest authority in your life, and to not to outsource that to anyone, not to any collective, not to any government, in my opinion, not even to God, right? That is your inherent right. The fact that you exist gives you that authority. You alone are responsible for your life. And to me, this is what it truly means to wake up, is to become responsible to that degree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree with you.
I'm loving this conversation, man. I didn't expect it to go this way, but I'm certainly glad it did, man, because these are very important concepts which I think need to be fleshed out. And I'm never going to be one to say here that I'm right and I only know the answers. We're here for the truth. We're not claiming to embody and know every single aspect of the truth. But I think through these conversations we can get closer to it, for sure.
That's right. As I thought about my presence on this podcast, I thought about what I could bring to it. By the way, it's quite a humbling thing to be asked to come on a podcast called Here for the Truth. I took that as an affirmation that I must be doing on the right track. But, I'm a human rights lawyer, and you could probably tell, and people listening could probably tell, that my view of the legal system is not very positive. And it's because ultimately I think these kinds of conversations are where the real seed of growth is for us as a collective. I think that everybody needs to be open to receiving information and ideas that maybe they haven't been open to before. And that if we can put ourselves in these spaces more often, better systems will grow than the ones that we currently deal with.
But again, this is where I think it comes down to individual, because a lot of people can't hear this information based on their trauma, based on their conditioning. Yes. So it's up to the individual to be able to have the resilience to have someone say something that's completely different than what they've been taught or
Yeah.
what they've learned, what they've embodied, and go, oh, okay, like I can have this conversation, I could communicate, I could take it in and go, there's some space there. This person actually, is pretty intelligent and they sound pretty rational. Let me, you know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
there's not even any space for that. And then all the censorship that's going on too that we talked about, that's not allowing for this melting pot of all these ideas and things for people to go in and go, oh, this is they're stuck in their thing. The algorithms keep them in their little box. Their families keep them in the box. A lot of them, it's like the crabs in the bucket analogy. It's like, no, we got to keep everyone in as well. So I don't know. It's just really interesting to have these conversations, and yeah,
It
Yeah,
is.
there's
It is.
also
Go
go
for it.
on. Well, I was just going to say,
The floor is yours.
well, this actually relates to what I'm saying, which is that, these conversations are great. Yerasimos, you're talking about the layers and layers and layers of sediment that exist for most people. The one of the effective things to get through that is when you can actually meet an individual in person and connect in a way that humans have connected for hundreds of thousands of years, which you can't quite do over Zoom. There's something that's not there. And, it's more difficult in this time to reach those people because obviously, there are more restrictions to having that face-to-face connection than before. There's obviously a huge benefit to these platforms as well and getting out to way more people. But for that person who's really in the depth of trauma, that something that can get through to them is if they were in a room with you, Yerasimos or Joel. I feel like a lot of those people would feel what you're saying, and that would immensely help them forward on their journey, which, I'm sure is happening for a lot of those people in their own lives. I hope anyway.
Yeah, listen, if there's a crack and people are open, for sure, some people they don't even have that. But again, I don't know, I was going to go somewhere with this and I forgot. But yeah.
I do that all the time, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also dealing with a major headache all day today that I'm navigating, so
Oh man,
it's all good.
you're doing really well. You've got a headache, and that's how you're performing. If I've got a headache, I'm
Well,
out of action.
the first 30 minutes of the podcast, I was not. So
Yeah, the people listening to this podcast would not have known you were even here.
yeah, I just had to gather myself and breathe, and then just like okay, it's okay. Let's just get into a deep conversation and get passionate, which is where I like conversations to go. But yeah,
What I wanted to add to that also was that for me in my life, and also for the majority of people, I believe they learn via osmosis more than anything else, even more than direct teachings. They learn by seeing someone else embody their truth and live their
Yes.
truth and step into their power. And for some reason, that gives them permission then to access more of theirs.
oh, now I remember what I wanted to say is I think a big piece to this too is when you get the understanding that the mainstream media is there to push certain agendas or indoctrinate you, and you can turn that off, that gives you the space for new stuff to come in and for you just to get back to yourself, just to be able to sit with yourself and to go, okay, well, who am I and what am I about? And like these people that I've shunned in my life, like, wait, what am I? And I'm speaking from personal experience, like people who have come back to me after a year and been like, I mean, you're like my homie, like you're my friend. Like, I don't know. What was happening. Like, I just needed to like get away. I was really scared. I needed to like heal my trauma. I needed to just go through my journey. And like, for me, like, oh man, I got so much love for that because there's an
Yes.
openness there.
Mm.
I'm not
Yes.
trying to say, oh, I was right. There's still differences. It's not like everyone's going to agree with me 100% on my views on health and wellness and the medical system. But I don't need anyone to agree with me. Ultimately, what I need is for someone to be open to go, hey, I'm an individual. I'm going to make my individual choices. You're an individual. You're going to make your individual choices, and we're cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to honor and respect each individual's right to make those personal choices.
Yes. Something that a part of my belief system is that we're all connected we're all part of a collective entity. And because of that, I think that the people who have really bought into what's happening right now are holding on to the identity that they have within it or whatever. When I look at those people, they don't seem to be happy. They don't seem to be doing very well. It's the idea of, I used the analogy before of a poisonous tree bears poisonous fruit. When I was in corporate law world, actually, one of the things that one of my triggers in my journey was I'd always ask lawyers, because I tried to avoid being a lawyer for a long time. I knew I didn't really want to be a lawyer. I still don't really want to be a lawyer, but I am still. And I'd always ask lawyers, "Are you happy? Do you actually enjoy this? Why are you doing this?" Especially senior lawyers. And they would always give me the same answer, which was they'd give me this balancing act where they'd say, "Oh, look, um, it's really stressful. I don't get much time with my kids. My health's not very good. Oh, but it pays good. It pays good." And they'd paint this picture where they've made all these compromises, and that they know that they're not happy. They know that they're sick. And one thing that I find is that even those people who are really bought into that system, if you can identify with them on that level of they know that something is not ideal, that might be the crack where you can say to them, "Hey, are you happy? Is working so hard great for you? Is you don't seem, if they start opening about maybe they're not very healthy, maybe they understand that the life that they're living doesn't facilitate their purpose, doesn't facilitate who they are." I think most people can feel, I guess what I'm saying is most people can feel that the system they live within is not really serving them. And then it's a matter of maybe giving them a few points of awareness, or maybe some tools to help them take a few steps forward. But there is a shared, even the people who advocate for the system are not benefiting from it for the most part, except from maybe a few people at the top. But even that benefit, I would say, is not legitimate. It might be financial, but ultimately what is having a lot of money? Are those people really fulfilled as human beings? If they are human beings, we maybe won't go there.
Yeah, and that maybe podcast number 2, we can go there. And again, each individual needs to decide. Like, some of these people have built careers 10, 20, 30 years, and they have the system that just filled into their life with the houses and the cars and all this stuff, that this job that they don't really like and they're not really happy with, and that's caused their health to plummet. Then it's like, talk about dark night of the soul. Like, that's a serious dark night of the soul that many people they don't know how to make that decision to go, what else am I gonna do? So I'm actually curious, because I wanted to get personal, because you were keep talking about, like, well, I didn't know if I was gonna be a lawyer. I didn't know if I want to do law, and I don't know if I still want to do law. So I'm curious.
I want to answer it for you.
Okay.
And for Peter.
Oh, can I ask my question?
I already know your question, but go finish it.
My question is, what do you want to do?
Well, I want to answer the question.
Okay, answer the question.
This is Peter's future career, and you can owe me $10,000 later, but you're going to be a coach and mentor to corporate types that want to develop more meaning in their life, and they want to exit the rat race.
I've never contemplated doing that
I know you
directly. I'll let you know how I go. To what I currently think about. Well, I'm in a position where a lot of people are asking me for legal help, and I'm transitioning out of. I feel that I'm transitioning out of that system where I'm working as a lawyer. I'm in the courts. I'm helping people with these very minute problems. And the dichotomy within Maat's method is that ultimately I'm just trying to be myself. And by being myself, what that means is I do coaching and mentorship is something that I do and something that I want to do more of. I haven't specifically thought about doing it for corporate types. The resistance I have to that is, although
It's the path
And
you
it's
walked,
never-
bro. Ultimately, it's the path you walked. It's what you know. It's the transformation you're able to facilitate. It may not land with you fully now, but sit with it.
I will sit with it. It's a good idea.
Send me all your birth information too, but we can look up your human design as well, and we can check into that. No.
Yeah, guys, rise above the herd. 8-week course kicking off again in May. You can sign up. So good.
Sorry,
Hey,
guys.
Peter.
Turn that.
Oh, you're right.
No worries.
I've got a very important question for you.
All right.
Okay. What did the left eye say to the right eye?
I don't know.
Between you and me, something smells.
Oh my god, dude!
Are you giving me a dad joke because I'm
It's a
about to
dad
become a
joke.
dad?
It's a dad joke.
You could use that one, bro. You're gonna be a dad soon, right?
Yes. In like a matter of days, or
Wow.
maybe days, maybe weeks. We'll see. Yeah, but it's imminent. It's imminent. Yeah, my wife and I are about to have a daughter.
Amazing.
Yes, indeed. It's a
Cool.
real chance for me to look at myself and say, "Hey, dude, you're going to have to learn a lot of things very quickly," and have my own getting out of bed moment as well. I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful experience.
It is, man, and it will be, and that more than anything else will fast track you into even deeper authenticity and truth quicker than anything you can possibly imagine. That's what that did for me anyway, for sure.
Yes.
And bro, we both sincerely hope everything goes really well throughout the whole process. Now, the real final question.
Okay.
Okay, if you had all of social media at your disposal and you could send one message and every single person on planet Earth with a social media platform or device or account would receive your message, what would that message be?
Gee, what responsibility.
Wow.
It has to be love. I know it's cliche, but I think that love is the best foundation block that we have. Whenever I don't know what to do, um, I know that if I choose love, and I don't mean love as a religious idea, love is much more powerful than how it's been diluted and referred to in lots of different ways. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but I would say that in our day to day, if each human being could, because this is a message to everyone, if each human being could make their decisions based on love, that would be an immediate course correction, and it would individually and collectively transform the planet. Um, and I say that from the perspective of someone who often doesn't make that choice. But I know that when I do, you'll, Joe Dispenza says your personality creates your personal reality. Um, if I could send one message to everybody, that's the message that I would send.
Just so you know, you can't send that on Twitter. You would have exceeded the character limit.
Oh, indeed. Oh, was I supposed to contain it to
No,
those
I'm just kidding.
parameters?
I just messing with you.
That's why I don't have a Twitter, because I don't know
Yeah.
how you're supposed to do that.
I mean,
Maybe I will.
Would there be emojis? Would there not be emojis? I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, indeed.
Dude, man, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Oh,
dude.
no
Well
worries.
said, bro. So glad to be able to connect deeper over the past 90 minutes, man. You're doing incredible things. I honestly honor you for choosing authenticity in your life and continuing to stand in integrity. Um, where can our people find you? If you have any offers, how can they get to you, etc.
Um, I have a Telegram. It's the Peter Pham Telegram. We have a website, which is martsmethod.com.au. There's a contact form on there. I'm starting to broadcast more and provide more outside of the legal realm, because people will come to me for different things, and one of the main things people still come for is legal help. If you want legal help, contact@martsmethod.com.au, but it's just me.
Mhm.
So I'm doing my best, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Each legal problem is a mammoth task. So I just give that disclaimer, but I'll do my best. People could reach me there. If you just want to connect, maybe follow me on Telegram. That's probably the best thing right now. I want to say as well to you guys, thank you for holding this space. I like the way you characterized Here for the Truth. I think it's so important that these spaces exist, that these messages are sent out into the world. At this time in history, it is a huge act of bravery, and it's an act of love to stand in your truth consistently, irrespective of the external world and whatever else is going on, to maintain that authenticity and to send that message out. It's very helpful. And to use one analogy, the reason I came across Joel through seeing your Instagram posts, I guess they're called, in early 2020. And it's like, I think I said this to you when we first spoke, it's like a little bit of medicine. If you're going through a difficult external environment and you're not sure, if what to do, or you're not sure, you're just dealing with it as best you can, and then you see something that resonates as true, it's very helpful. So what you guys are doing is, sorry for all that, buddy, my phone's gone off because that's the lawyer side of things. What you guys are doing is extremely valuable, and I admire it, and just send you love and support.
Thanks. I think your phone's going off. A lot of people heard you were on Here for the Truth. So
yeah. Yeah, indeed.
Thank you so much for that acknowledgement, man. And dude, we're going to put all your links in the show notes so people can access you pretty easily. I definitely recommend joining your Telegram, particularly for any Australians. A lot of awesome information in there. Guys, thank you so much for listening to Here for the Truth, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time, they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean, fast forward in evolution to a place where we can share our confusions. Yeah, 450 BC, I'm sharing tea with